Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on the channel. We are closing with the 2024 World Rapid Championship. We've seen a lot of games by now, miniature games, and we have two more to go today and tomorrow, and then we'll move on to new and very exciting tournaments. Today's miniature game is a very interesting and exciting matchup between international master from Ukraine, Oleksii Biliych, rated 2435, a young and upcoming international master with already soon good chances to become a grandmaster. And with the black pieces, grandmaster Victor Bologan from Moldavia, personal friend of mine. I've known Victor for many years. We used to play in the same team in Spain. He speaks very good Spanish and obviously very good English. He works for FIDE now. He's one of FIDE's top members, but every now and then still comes back to the board to play. He used to be 2700, so we're talking about an extremely good player, although in the latter part of his chess career. Let's get into the matchup, and I think you'll really enjoy this game. So, Bilych, although he is only an international master, he is widely considered to be one of the better blitz and rapid chess players. Very fast, very accurate, and also with a special opening repertoire for these types of games. He opens with e4. Bologan proposes a perk defense, but here he has another idea in mind. As you all know, perk defense would begin with g6, following with bishop to g7, but Victor plays e5. Now this is one of the modern ways of achieving a Philidor defense, but with a different move order. And the idea behind this move order is to sidestep some of the more dangerous approaches against the Philidor defense by using this move order. If white plays, as in the game, knight to f3, we have the main position of the Philidor defense. However, white does have the option of exchanging pawns and exchanging queens. Now, when we're beginners, we normally try to avoid this. We don't know how to play with the king in the center. We don't like to exchange the queens too fast. As beginners, we avoid these types of variations. But seasoned players who know how to play endings, who know how to play with the king in the center, and who don't mind playing without queens, quite enjoy this variation. And I think it's actually quite good for black. So most players don't exchange queens at a higher level, and they play knight to f3. Now, look at this position carefully and notice that there is a knight on c3 because of the move order. Generally in the Philidor, knight f3, d6, d4, against knight to d7, which is the variation we're considering, although knight to c3 is playable, and this would transpose, here bishop to c4 is much more dangerous. And there are many tricks and traps related to the f7 square. So a lot of players actually prefer this move order. They study the endgame, just in case someone exchanges, but against knight to f3, and now white can play bishop to c4, but now we go bishop to e7, and it's all good. There's actually a very good trap here, which I'm going to show you. A lot of people fall into this trap. They play bishop takes pawn, they check, and then they play knight to e6, thinking that they're going to win the queen, or a rook and a queen. But this position has been studied, and it's actually better for black. So be careful and don't fall into this trap, which looks good, but it's not good at all. Going back to the game and leaving these traps behind, Biliych, as I said before, has a special repertoire for blitz and rapid games. When you're playing blitz and rapid, especially with white, one of the main ideas is to get an aggressive position, an attacking position, even if it's not 100% sound, because your opponent has less time to pause and consider the different defenses he has he can play. So it's good to get the initiative and attack when you're playing with white. So Biliych has come up with rook to g1, which I already knew this move, to try and play g4, g5. But you don't see it very often in classical chess. But it's very interesting blitz and rapid. c6, g4. The center is not closed, but it's stable, so white can actually go for this idea. And of course, at the end, he will try to castle on the long side. h6, bishop to e3, bishop to e7, and now queen to d2 is possible, but I think that Bilych doesn't want to face b5 with the threat b4 and knight takes e4. So he prefers to put the queen on e2, so he has some sort of protection of the e4 square, and also when he long castles, the rook will vis-vis with the queen on d8. So b5, long castle. Now this is an important mode of the game. Bologan's move is very sensible. He plays b4. But the computer does suggest that maybe it would have been better to play queen a5 first, threatening b4. And in fact, if king b1 to protect the a2 pawn, b4, funnily enough, traps the knight because there's no square for the knight to go to. Basically because there's a queen on e2. With the queen on d2, we would have knight to e2 and knight to c1 here. So queen a5 may have been slightly better. I think that in this case, Bilych would have played knight to d2 and would have transferred his knight to b3. In any case, Bologan played b4 straight away, knight to a4, queen to a5, and pawn to b3. Now, if you're thinking, what about the pawn on e4? This is where this queen here will come in very useful. There could be all sorts of tricks and traps based on the king in the center. For example, I'd have to calculate this properly, but bishop to d2, just protecting against knight to c3 and hitting the queen and hitting the pawn behind already seems quite interesting. And then certain moves such as pawn takes pawn, opening the position, can also be very, very interesting. And if knight to c3, we take. We do have to be careful with this move, but here is an interesting idea. King to b1 with the idea to drop back with the bishop, protect against the mate, and now everything is working for white in the center. So as you can see, the queen on e2 is very, very interestingly placed. So what did Bologan do? A nice move, knight to b6. Of course, what he wants to do is exchange the knight and then try and mate on the a file. But Bilych will not allow this, of course. As soon as the knight goes to the side, Bilych decides to open up the center. Check this out. All white's pieces are developed except for the bishop, and the black king is still in the center. And if he goes to the king side, g4 will also open up the position. Having said that, knight to b6 threatens the knight on a4 and also threatens the pawn on g4. So this is a very, very, it's exciting, but a very dangerous position for both players. The next moves will be key to see who's going to end up better here. So Bilych has to strike, and he strikes with pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn, and he strikes again with g5. Pawn takes pawn and knight takes pawn. Now, we can't talk about pawn structure here. It's all dynamics in this position. But basically, what white wants to do is to try and get the queen somewhere on the king side or in the center and bring the bishop up to c4. If he can get that going, f7 would be very dangerous. Also, there are some sacrifices here against the lone black king. So it's becoming very, very complex, the game. Now, according to my analysis, the best move for black here, for Bologan, the best move and the most logical move would have been knight takes knight. Bilych would have played pawn takes, queen takes, and now queen to c4, protecting and threatening. The best move for black here is castle, and I've analyzed a bit this position, and I think it's very double-edged. Anything can happen here. Both kings are unsafe. White can play king to c1 and regroup the bishop to b2. Luckily for white, there's never a bishop e6 here because of the knight. And white meanwhile can advance the pawn to h and try and blast open the king side. Black can also play things. Queen a3, a5, a4, b3 is one idea. a5, bishop a6 is another idea. So it's actually a very interesting position. Bologan didn't play knight takes a4. he played knight f to d7. I think this is too slow. I understand what he's trying to do. Eliminate the knights, capture here, maybe knight to c5 afterwards, but it's too slow. And you can't give a player such as Bilych the chance to sacrifice. And he goes straight for the sacrifice. Knight takes pawn. King takes, and queen g4. Now he's hitting the g7's pawn. He's hitting the g6 square. If black takes on a4, we stick in the intermediate bishop to c4 move, and everything's looking very good. Now, according to my analysis, the best defense here was not bishop to f6, which is what Bologan played in the game, which actually looks very sensible. But the best defense is g5, a very difficult move to find. And after bishop takes g5, knight to f6 with a double threat on the queen. Now the bishop is blocking the dangerous squares, so you have to drop back, and now bishop to e6, and here the computer suggests rook to d6, an unbelievable move, rook to f8, and it's just a complete mess, hugely complicated. Anything can happen here. I just don't know who would have won this game in this position. I have no idea at all. It's hugely complex. But this is the sort of position that Bilych strives for. He plays very well at these types of positions. Bologan missed his chance. He played bishop to f6, and now, although the computer does say that rook to d6 is very, very good, and sacrifice on f6, this would be winning completely. Bilych played bishop to c4 check, which is also very good, with the idea that knight takes leaves the d7 knight unprotected. And so we take here, take with the queen, and then there are many threats, and black is actually losing this position. There's one line I calculated, knight to c5, and I calculated this very fun line, which finishes in a mate. This is just to give you an idea of the sorts of variations that could appear on the board in this type of line. So if you're in for this sort of position, now you should put this line in your repertoire. If you're a more slow and calm guy like me, maybe this is just too much for you. I used to play like this when I was 25, but times have changed. You need to be very energetic, very young, and have good calculations to be able to go into these positions, because if you make one mistake, the other side will kill you. So you have to be very careful. King to f8, rook to d6, already threatening some sacrifices. Rook to h7, trying to defend, and bishop c5. I mean, Bilych is playing fantastic here, fantastic. Now there's a discovered check threatened, so to take is forced. We take here, and now pawn takes will lose the rook in the game. This is completely over. And after king e8, check and take, Bologan decided to call it a day because the rook is not capturable because of rook to g8, checkmate. So what have we learned in this game? Apart from seeing an exciting and dynamic game, we've learned a new idea against the delayed Philidor, this rook to g1 and g4. We've understood that a knight on a4 blocks black's attack during many moves, and that does allow us to attack on the king side in the center while black is dealing with the knight on a4. That's been very interesting. But I think we've also learned that you can defeat a stronger player, but you have to play very enterprisingly. You have to risk as well. You have to risk to lose in order to be able to win. I hope you enjoyed. We've still got one more game left of the World Rapid, which we'll see tomorrow, and then we'll move on to new games. As always, having fun, learning some new tricks and traps, learning some new openings, and getting to know some of the best players in the world. See you soon. See you in the next video.